In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Do you want the whole truth?
I don't think you're ready.
Governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people.
It's Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth.
Well, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm glad you're here. We're glad you're here. Yes, we are. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, proudly on. Say it with me. AFR Talk. How's your day going? Happy Tuesday. Bit chilly. I got to tell you, these seasons, we have summer and fall and winter and spring. Must be global warming or climate change. I mean, this change. That's always happened? Yeah. Well, then the cold's George Bush's fault. I'll tell you what. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. We have to jump right in. We've had a little time to cover a lot. And I always think we have a little time in that sense. 90 minutes. Just sit back. You're going to enjoy the program. Bottom of the hour, we're going to have Avik Roy comment on the latest thought coming from Bill Clinton, former president, impeached, not removed. Bill Clinton commenting on the health care promise. Find out what Avik Roy has to say. But first, we're going to be speaking with Tom Joslin of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And if you're looking for somebody who knows about Iran and the history with Iran, look no further than Tom Joslin of the Weekly Standard and the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Tom, it is great to be with you. Thank you for taking the time. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Crane?
I'm good. I want to start out with this. This is Senator John Kerry, Secretary of State John Kerry. I try to forget now and again. Answering some questions from the Associated Press as covered about the talks with Iran and the progress on the deal that they really didn't make this past weekend and criticism of the proposed deal. Roll it.
I believe the Prime Minister needs to recognize that no agreement has been reached about the end game here. That's the subject of the negotiation. The sanctions were put in place in order to bring about a negotiation. Because the first order of business of any superpower is to exercise its power thoughtfully and respectfully. And if we had to turn to a military option because we are left no other option, we must show the world we have exhausted every possible remedy and opportunity. Nothing is given up in a first step that freezes the program and even sets it back while you begin to negotiate to see what is possible with respect to the proving of a peaceful nuclear program. That is the tough negotiation.
Now, he's responding to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's criticism, which was quite severe, and we've played that over and over. But in general, he's speaking to the idea of negotiations with Iran. Tell me, there was a report coming from somebody with your organization, of course, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a report that we have already been negotiating with Iran on sanctions and have been weakening them, the Obama administration. Is that true?
Well, I think there's been some reporting over the last week in general that the sanctions regime has sort of been weakened since the election of President Hassan Rouhani to the presidency of Iran. Rouhani is portrayed, and he's very consciously portraying himself as a moderate that we can deal with. Now, the problem here is there are many problems here, but one of the things that I like to point out is that Rouhani has been one of the top officials in Iran's national security establishment for decades, and throughout much of that time, throughout all of that time, in fact, one of the principal instruments of state power that Iran has used is terrorism, and sponsoring terrorism not only against Americans, but against other people in various countries around the globe, really. And the idea that he has been a top leader the upper echelons of Iran's national security establishment as all this is going on, and yet is somehow a moderate we can bargain with, strikes me as fanciful.
But the alternative to not negotiating is a stalemate that we've been experiencing for years, and over the last 30 years, we haven't talked to them. They've continued to attack us. Now they're going forth with a nuclear weapon. Wouldn't it be great to stop them without the use of military force? You have to understand when I ask that question, Tom, I ask it not because I agree with it, but because that is the idea behind things. We can prevent war. We can bring peace through negotiation. These are rational actors. Your thoughts?
A couple of problems there. First of all, the premise of your question is that we haven't talked to Iran before, and I don't think that's right. My colleague, actually I know it's not right, my colleague Michael Ledeen has pointed out on numerous occasions that, in fact, we've talked to Iran throughout the decades over and over again. Ambassador Ryan Crocker had a New York Times op-ed recently saying, talk to Iran because it works, but and because he was talking to Iran as the ambassador in Iraq throughout the time there. But what's curious is if you actually look at his op-ed, even as he's arguing that we should talk to Iran because it works, he concedes that, in fact, when he was in Iraq, it didn't work, that it didn't accomplish anything. And that's really the problem you have here, is that unless you have very defined goals about what you want to accomplish through negotiations, and, hey, I would love to settle all this once and for all so I can stop thinking about it. But unless you have some framework, to actually get this done and have some reasonable goals, and you have some metrics that you can use to measure those goals and figure out if they've been attained, and none of what's on the table right now has any of that, then this is all just sort of kabuki theater.
Well, look, we've tried it the other way. I mean, the fact is, we look at what happened in Iraq. We've tried to deal militarily with enemies that attack us through terror, through planning of terror, through the attacking our allies, our number one ally, certainly in the region, arguably the world, that would be Israel. We've tried it the way of with bombs and bullets. I don't understand. Why is it that you seem to be driven, you and Crane Durham and so many others are a bunch of neocons who want to reshape the world in America's image, and that you give us only two choices. You say attack or do nothing. Why, Tom?
No, I never have said that. All that is just so caricatured and so
okay, but
just
tell me,
muddied in mythology. I don't even know where to begin. But
okay, but tell me something real quick, Tom. Real quick. That is what oftentimes the debate is in the cartoonish world. And so break that down and tell me why that's not the truth. Go ahead, please.
Well, I mean, the problem for somebody like me is I've been advocating a different course all along for years and years and years. And so then sort of just plot me into this time and moment and say, okay, what would you do now? It's sort of kind of ridiculous because I've been arguing for a different path all along, from sponsoring the Iranian people when they uprise against the government to give them the support they need, to more robustly containing Iran's terrorism apparatus and holding them accountable for that, I think that the possibility of military strikes should always be on the table, but that's not something I lust for or something I desire, of course. It's just I don't see in a lot of cases how these alternative sort of paths are being productive for us. Now, that doesn't mean I necessarily default to military use. In fact, I don't. But the problem is that a lot of what is being advocated is sort of based on the premise you just laid out, which is basically, well, we don't want to engage in a military strike, so let's try these negotiations, these talks. Well, what I say is it's fine to try negotiation or talks if you know what you're doing and you have narrowly defined objectives that can be measured and can be achieved. The problem here is I don't think that's the case. I think the talks are mainly about just delaying this as an issue, and none of this is ultimately going to really contain Iran's nuclear infrastructure and is going to allow them to have the breakout capability that they so desperately desire.
Were the sanctions, or have the sanctions been working?
I think yes and no. I think they're a vital instrument to try and provide economic pressure on the Iranian regime. There's been some, I think, heavy-duty reporting over the last couple of days, however, about Ayatollah Khamenei's personal infrastructure, which has accrued just billions and billions and billions of dollars of assets that he and those around him have accrued, and sort of that insulates him and really gives him power within the regime. And ultimately, this is all about what Khamenei decides. I mean, he's the ultimate decision maker. So whoever's president of Iran really is just going to answer to Khamenei at the end of the day. And the thing is, have we seen any evidence that Khamenei really wants to change Iran's course in the world? I haven't. I don't think that's true. I think a lot of this is just sort of tactical adjustments by Iran given the situation right now internationally. It's sort of very good for them to string this out and play us and basically, put a guy out there who can claim to be a moderate. But the bottom line is, on a daily basis, Iran continues to sponsor terrorism around the globe. And that, to me, means the regime has not changed one iota.
So you have a theocracy run by Khomeini, and it is the president selected out of 7 candidates were selected by the Ayatollah. And bottom line, Rouhani is one of them. And we have to understand that the power is with the Ayatollah Khomeini. With that in mind, what is his game plan? What is his desire?
Well, I think Khamenei has a couple of different things. He wants to maintain his own power internally within Iran, but I think he's a revolutionary. He's a political revolutionary who desires to expand Iran's sphere of influence and ultimately the Iranian Revolution. And there are several things he does on a regular basis from Lebanon to Syria to support that. And right now, in Syria, for example, you see that Hezbollah, which has long been an Iranian proxy, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and other Iranian agents have come to the side of Assad to try and prop up the Assad regime and make sure that Assad doesn't completely fall inside that country. What
about the nuclear issue? I mean, what does he desire with a nuclear weapon? Why is Benjamin Netanyahu's? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
What I was going to say is, if you look at his behavior, what's the ultimate insurance that the Iranian Revolution lives and that he can maintain power throughout the region, whether it be expanding Iran's influence in Syria or elsewhere? And the ultimate thing that provides sort of an arc of protection for him is a nuclear weapon. Because as we've seen with Pakistan or North Korea, there's only a certain amount of measures that the international community is willing to take once a armed nation acquires nuclear weapons. So you can have a North Korean dictator who can oppress his people and really have some mass enslavement of them and drive them into sort of poverty and malnourishment, starve them really. You can have Pakistan, which sponsors all sorts of jihadist groups and terrorism and even works against American interests even during the war on terror in a number of different ways. And yet there's only a certain amount that the international community wants to do against these rogue regimes once they get a nuclear weapon. I think the same calculus applies to Khamenei. I mean, where's the Iranian nuclear program? Where were its origins? Well, in large part, the Pakistani program, and who has Iran worked with for years in terms of developing missiles and probably other aspects of the nuclear program? Well, North Korea. So I think that Iran probably sees, and Khamenei sees this sort of calculus that these other rogue regimes have made, and it's probably the same calculation. Once you have a nuclear weapon or the capability to build multiple nuclear weapons, it provides insurance.
What makes them particularly dangerous, or do you see them as just as dangerous and in the sense of aggressive as North Korea or Pakistan? Or is there something different with Iran?
Well, I think all these regimes pose a level of danger, particularly in Pakistan, where the regime is very unstable. You have one of the fastest growing nuclear arsenals in a country that's completely compromised by jihadism and these terrorist groups. That's just a potent mix, which I can't warn about enough. But in Iran, it's sort of the same mix of ideology and nuclear weapons, where you have this fervent anti-American, anti-Israeli ideology, and the idea that you're going to have nuclear weapons in the hands of that regime eventually really is obviously a huge concern.
Tom Jocelyn, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and also he writes for the Weekly Standard, as well as the Long War Journal, if I'm not mistaken, Tom. I want to credit everything.
Sure.
Extraordinary work as always. We have so much more to cover, and that's why I'm going to have to ask you back. So, Tom, thank you for being with us right now, and we appreciate your expertise. It's great to talk with you, buddy.
Thanks, Greg.
Take care. All right, on the flip side, Avik Roy. He is a writer for Forbes.com, a Manhattan Institute's senior fellow, and he was Mitt Romney's, actually the Romney healthcare plan advisor. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, AFR Talk.